psychology of Rocky IV.
The psychological inquiry starts when Rocky clearly questions Apollo if the fight with the Russian is...
So do you think maybe it's like you against you?
Obviously, who you are versus who you were. Their discussion reveals their differing views on the place that fighting occupies in their identity. Rocky sees being a fighter as what he is, and eventually he won't be. It's a temporary role, a job. Apollo sees being a fighter as who he is. It's a permanent feature. Apollo's death in the ring and refusal to stop fighting until the very end challenges and changes not only Rocky's psychology, but also his philosophy. Death is a powerful driver for this type of fundamental change. Rocky witnesses in real time a very real lesson that being a fighter is a permanent feature. It stayed with Apollo to the moment of his death. This example changes Rocky's viewpoint. He now sees it as a permanent feature in himself too.
But the baby, he's gonna have to kill me.
Not just a temporary, glorious job. Apollo sought out the Drago fight to reclaim his former glorious self. Rocky seeks out this fight for revenge over Drago's callousness. An accidental blow or contrition wouldn't have caused a Christmas Day fight. For different reasons, they both decide to fight Drago rather than are told to. They decide their goal, rather than society, a government, or an institution deciding it. Apollo decides on this fight because he continually needs to get his love from the crowd as he lacks that self-esteem. The greater the spectacle, the greater the love, hence the need for the show. The private fight in the gym, which years later we find out he won, was not satisfying anything. The truth is, he never recovered psychologically from the disaster of that first fight with Rocky. He watched his love and adoration disintegrate in front of his eyes as Rocky won the love of the crowd that night and Apollo lost it. He thought that fighting the individual privately would settle his feeling. He thinks he can't process that defeat because of how close it was. But that isn't what's eating away at him. It's the loss of love from the crowd, not the loss to the man. Whatever victory Apollo could win in that private match would be hollow. Rocky has no reason to fight, and Apollo has every reason to win. The lack of satisfaction that Apollo received from the outcome of that private fight fuels his ultimate demise. Apollo's mistake is in always setting the goal higher than just winning. In Rocky, it had to be a spectacle. In Rocky II, it had to be a humiliation. In Rocky IV, it has to be a political statement. Apollo keeps making the same mistake on a bigger and bigger scale, and it eventually costs him. Apollo basically wins the Darwin Award for not learning anything whatsoever over 3 films. He wants to recreate that bicentennial fight he had with Rocky to win back the love of not just the boxing fans, but the whole country this time. In the first film, he took on an inferior professional boxer with disastrous results to his self-esteem. He thinks that if he takes on an amateur, there's going to be less jeopardy. The mistake he makes is equating the lack of riches in the amateur ranks with lack of skill or competence. He's done more research on the fighter, but his analysis is incorrect, skewed by his need for love and recognition again. He thinks the fighting spirit only applies to him. He doesn't realize that the speech he gives about
and you can forget all this money and stuff you got all around you, man, because it don't change a thing.
Applies to those he fights too. He repeats this same mistake from the first film, underestimating his opponent, and the lesson is that if we repeat the same mistakes and double down, it'll cost us everything. Apollo thinks fighting is who he is. Fighting feeds his esteem and gauges his worthiness. He explains fighting as being in his essential nature, a part of him, like an arm or a leg, but really, fighting is like a tumor that he needs to feed. It's the only way he can validate his worth. He continues to need to fight because he continues to have low self-esteem. As his feeling about his worth slips, he needs to fight again. The mechanism here is that if a fighter sees someone that's considered worthy and they beat them, they think they're going to get that worthiness. If they win, they feel worthy until they see someone else who's also considered worthy. This makes them feel inadequate again, which means they've got to fight them so they can regain their worthiness. It can feel like an essential essence because it's an ever-worsening, self-sustaining cycle. Rocky sees fighting as a job. He requires a reason to do the job of fighting, yes, but his reason doesn't appear to be low self-esteem as it was in Rocky 2. He's moved beyond that. This time, his reason is revenge for the death of his friend. Nothing as self-serving as low self-esteem. But let's just think about that for a sec. Revenge is trying to recorrect the past with actions in the present. It's a coping mechanism. Revenge is taking the pain and hurt of the past and channeling that fuel into present destructive action on someone you decide deserves it. Guilt is taking the pain and hurt of the past and channeling that fuel into present destructive action on yourself. The fight with Drago satisfies both those criteria perfectly. He takes action, arranging the fight against the wishes of his government. He accepts substandard training facilities because that's the punishment he wants to inflict upon himself to quash the guilt he feels for his lack of action that night. When we feel guilt, we punish ourselves for the wrong. We turn the hurt inwards. It's masochistic. And Drago is also the agent he decides must be beaten to gain his revenge for his friend, effectively completing Apollo's journey for him. When we want revenge, we punish others for the wrong. We turn the hurt outwards and seek to attack. If our attack is met by an attack, we've got to fight. He's always needed Adrian as she's been his esteem, his nurture. Her positive esteem has filled his self-esteem tank to 100%. When she doesn't approve, he doesn't fight. So why is it different this time? As Apollo acted like a big brother and took Rocky at his lowest point and got him to reinvent himself, essentially taking him from the disillusioned teenager, psychologically speaking, to adult, he has brotherly love for Apollo. That love was frozen in state at the point of death. Apollo dying in his arms meant that Rocky changed his opinion, accepting Apollo's view.
Nah, Stallion, maybe you think you're changing, but you can't change what you really are. See, we're born with a killer instinct that you can't just turn off and on like some radio. We have to be right in the middle of the action because we're the warriors.
And effectively absorbing the spirit of Apollo. He goes from fighting is my role to fighting is who I am.
Because I'm a fighter.
This is all on the self-esteem side of the equation. So fighting for revenge defines who he is, and this is why he doesn't require Adrian to provide him esteem as she's done previously. The memory of Apollo, his dead brother, has told him who he is, and that's enough. The hurt he feels has mortally reduced his self-esteem. While Adrian might be able to increase his esteem through love and nurture, she doesn't try. She expresses her own anxiety and fear instead.
It's suicide! You've seen him, you know how strong he is.
And this means that rather than love possibly extinguishing that hurt, the hurt multiplies. The fuel he needs for the journey is the death of his best friend and the lack of support from his wife. He leaves, and she walks away. Rocky also learned in the third film that fighting is an effective way of reconciling the guilt he felt over Mickey's death. And Apollo's legacy to Rocky is that you get on and repurpose pain, channeling it into a fight as quickly as possible. Hence why he wastes no time setting it up. And this brings us to the journey. Either path, guilt or revenge, help cope with a hurt. The hurt felt is repurposed into fuel to take that journey and complete the task. In this fight, every blow he receives is accepted as the punishment for the guilt he feels. Every blow he delivers is the punishment he's meting out.